Welcome along, and we continue on with this army analysis series, and we have made it to the High Middle Ages. This is the first video that I'm going to do on the High Middle Ages, and this army, the Papal 1050 army with the Norman allies, the 1061 allies, is the army that I used in season 11 of the Digital League. And I would like to tell you also, just just to blow my own trumpet and show you what an expert I am. No, but I managed to finish second in Division B with this army. So I have got some experience with this army, and I can let you in on some secrets that I found while playing in the league. And Division B was very tough. I had a few lucky results, but this army, it was my first time playing with them. We were playing with new armies. I'd never used the Papal list before, but it did well. It performed well, and I'm going to go into some of the details of how and why. As you can see, this is a pretty infantry heavy army, but a lot of the armies that you're going to face are infantry heavy, other than the Arab lists. And we're just getting, actually, I think today there's a brand new DLC just being released, and maybe there'll be some more cavalry heavy armies. But really, apart from the Arab armies, the European armies, a lot of them are pretty infantry heavy. And there are a few little advantages you have. The Crossbowmen, in my opinion, I did a top 10 video for medieval, and I think there are around 5 on my list. Let's zoom in a little bit. Let's get a nice close up. And these units are excellent. 39 is a real bargain, because they're not just bowmen, they are swordsmen as well. So they can do some damage with their crossbows, but then once in melee, they can hold and do well, especially against the poorer quality infantry, because they are swordsmen. I know this is a random army I'm facing here, and it's one of the Muslim armies. As an example, the crossbowmen would do well against irregular foot, and it would be able to hold against spearmen. They're defensive spearmen, so they're not going to get any advantages on impact. So in most cases, even in the open field, they're going to do a good job. And if you can use, there's often rough ground. Maybe if we wanted to be more offensive, we'd come up on the left and we'd cover this side with the crossbowmen. Or if you just wanted to sit back, there's this large patch of rough ground here. We could just place them here, let them come on to us. One problem with the Muslim armies is they are lightly protected. Their veteran spearmen are protected, but the other units got lightly protected and protected, so they're not armored in any way. So that's going to be an advantage for you with the crossbowmen. They are really good, and they bulk out your army a little bit as well. They give you the ability to use your ranged units, but then they can also fight. So I really highly recommend these crossbowmen. You got your standard defensive spear. I think I brought 8 with me altogether. Yeah, there's another 2 there. These are great units, 36, your standard, bog standard units, but they won't let you down, and I've seen them hold against better units. So as kind of a mainstay of your army, they're really good. The raw spear, they came in my top 10 as well, would you believe it or not? But the reason they did is because there were only 24. I mean, you know, that's the cost of your skirmishers, and a lot of skirmishers are more than 24. They're 30. So they are, as a heavy infantry unit, defensive spear, they are just awesome for the price. So I always pack out my army with some raw spear. Now you've got to be careful. I've just set this up more to show you the units, not as how I would play. But if I was going to set the army up as how I was going to probably set up to play, then I would mix them in a little bit. Put some with my defensive spear. Have them in reserve. A few maybe on the flanks, because they're actually quite good against cavalry. They can do a decent job because they're spearmen. A few in the center, a few on the flanks, a few maybe mixed in with my main line. That's how I would play. You don't put them all together. This is just, I'm just putting them on display. But in a real battle, I would have them mixed in, and they do a great job. And 24, it just means you can field more units. So, against the Muslim army, they've just got their cheaper end units are irregular foot, which I think costs 30. So, yeah, these raw spear can be really effective. I've also got the early dismounted knights. Now, they're not as good as the tanks that are the fully armoured dismounted knights, but you've got to also factor in the price as well. They're a decent price. They're 69, and the fully armoured knights are 78. So these are 9 less per unit, which is quite a lot. And in my experience, even though they're not as good as the fully armoured dismounted knights, they're still armoured and they're superior quality. So basically, they're going to be better than 90% of the units that you're facing on the battlefield. And this kind of army, the Muslim army, they don't have anything that's better. These veteran spear are great units. How much are they? Are they 58 or so? But they're just not as good as your early dismounted knights. And another thing to consider is that in High Middle Ages, most armies don't have access to any dismounted knights whatsoever. So, it's only like the German lists that have got the fully armoured dismounted knights. And then there's a few other lists, like the Norman list. These are my allies for this Papal list, and they've got access to them. There's not that many lists that have any kind of dismounted knights. So really, for 69, they are a really good buy. And there's 2 types as well. And basically, overall, the spearmen are better, I would say, because you get the advantage for being offensive spearmen. They're going to do better against cavalry. They're going to do very well against swordsmen. Whereas the heavy weapon, really, the best use of a heavy weapon unit is against armored units. And, you know, fighting against the Arabs, there are no or hardly any armored units. Well, in fact, they're just protected, the infantry. So it becomes a little bit of a waste, a heavy weapon. Not to say that it can't be really effective, and not to say that these dismantle knights are not good, because I've taken one. But overall, the spearmen are better. And I think in a few of the other Norman allies, you've only got access to the heavy weapon dismantle knights. So really, a one advantage of this particular list of allies, the 1061, is you've got up to 4 of the early dismantle knights, and you've got 2 of the spearmen. You don't have a lot of cav, which is a bit of a disadvantage, but a lot of armies don't have that much cav. You've got the early knights. Again, they're not as good as your fully armoured knights at 72, and they also cost the same, but they're manoeuvrable, which is an advantage, because often you need to whiz around and try to get flanks. So that's one advantage. And you've also got access to the city knights. Now, I haven't, even the fully armoured version, I haven't been that impressed by city knights. But actually at 60, they're knightly lancers. So they do well. They get the advantage for being knightly lancers. They get more of an advantage against spearmen and infantry against your standard lancers, because one of the ally lists had, I think it was the 1071 Norman list that you can use as allies. I think they had access to one of the armoured Muslim lancers at 56. But overall, for 4 more, you may as well go for the city knights, because they're knightly lancers and you get more POA advantage. So even though I haven't really been so impressed with city knights, they're still lancers and they're 60, so they're useful. Keep moving these these guys around. I've only got one skirmisher unit, but in my experience, you can use the crossbowmen. You've got 6 crossbowmen. You've just got to go for it, really. You can't mess around. You've just got to really get stuck in. But there, in my experience, there weren't so many armies with huge amount of skirmishers. In High Middle Ages, we played at 1200 points. So you've got some tough decisions to make. When you're playing at 1600 points, I think you can generally feel more comfortable taking extra skirmishers. But when it's 1200, for me anyway, I tend to spend my money on the raw spearmen, for example, rather than 1 or 2 extra skirmishers. But that's just me. If you wanted to, you could maybe take out a few of the raw spearmen and add a few skirmishers. But you've only got access to one of the cheaper end skirmishers at 24, then it jumps up to 30. So really, I would just rely on your crossbowmen. Overall, this is a very good army. A very good army. I'd give it about a B+. I've been giving ratings to armies, and for me, this is a really strong army because of these dismounted knights. Mixed in with crossbowmen, mixed in with a number of the raw spear and your defensive spear, you're just gonna be really solid with your infantry. There's not many armies that are going to really cause a lot of problems with infantry. Yes, the German Imperial list has obviously access to the better dismounted knights. It's got a lot of spearmen as well. It's got, I think, some armoured spearmen. So that kind of army, that is, in my opinion, one of the best armies in the game. That kind of army can really do a lot of damage. Even these Arab armies, when they've got a lot of cavalry, so many spearmen, you know, they're probably going to have more infantry than you, so that's going to be an issue. But overall, against most armies, this is very strong. Very strong. Because you've still got some fairly decent cavalry. You know, 3 lancers and the city knights. Or the early knights and the city knights. So it's just really solid. Sometimes, but you know, this is the story of all or most armies in High Middle Ages. Just that maneuverability. It's quite tough to flank, and you know, you don't have a lot of, or you don't actually have any medium infantry in this list. So it's kind of it's a bit of a hammer army, I would say. You just got to go straight at the enemy. Nothing fancy. Just go straight at them. You don't have really hardly any skirmishers. Don't have any medium infantry. You don't have a lot of cavalry. So just go for it. And I generally try to use my dismounted knights as kind of the hammer within the hammer. They would lead the charge. They'd get good matchups, and once they break a unit, it can set off kind of a chain reaction route, really. But then you've always got to be watching on your flanks, because you've got light cav coming round, extra cav, camel lancers, whatever it is. If I've only got 4 units, that's a problem, because how can I protect both my flanks with only 4 cav units? So you've really got to maybe keep 1 or 2 cav in reserve, a couple of cav here, and then you've just got to block off one side really of your army. And I don't know, in this kind of map, maybe what I would do, I would advance maybe here. Maybe I'd use most of my cav, maybe 3, just to push away the cav. I'd maybe keep 1 back, and then I'd use this rough ground. What I might do is advance and try and put a couple of crossbowmen here, and this would be great because this would stop, you know, you've got this forest here as well. This would stop the enemy bringing cav round easily, because crossbowmen are pretty good against cav as well. You know, you could just keep a unit or two here, put a few units here, and then your main advance would be here. That's the kind of thing that I would do. So yeah, a B+, good army, and there are a few options with the allies. I did check through the allies. One of the maybe other main options would be the Byzantine allies, but when I went through it, yes, you've got the guard foot. You know, you could take maybe one dismounted knight. You'd have about 7 defensive spear, about 8 raw spear. But the only real advantage for taking Byzantine list would be the lancers. You know, you could maybe take 2 knights, one of the tagmatic lancers and maybe 2 of the Byzantine lancers, and those lancers are pretty decent. I think they're 41. It's a good price, but when, you know, you're only getting 5 cav, so, you know, I've got 4 here, so you're only really gaining 1 cav unit, and you're losing out on one of these dismounted knights units, and you're adding the guard unit. So overall, in my opinion, this army with these allies is probably overall a better option, because you're not really going to win with cavalry. Cavalry is the support. So although some people might like an extra cav, and also with the Byzantine you get the mixed infantry archer units, and maybe some players can use them really effectively. So it's an option, but I think this army is probably just more straightforward and just easier to use, because as I said before, these units are only 69 and yet they're superior and armored, and you don't need a guard unit at 87. In my opinion, it's kind of probably too expensive. These units are fine at 69, and you get an extra unit as well compared to that list and that setup that I looked at. So they're fine. They do a really good job. Okay, so that's the first video. We've got season 12 just around the corner. I'm not going to be joining in this season because I've got a few things to do in the real world. So, but what I am going to do, and I'd like also to shout out to Devon Kopp. Devon Kopp sent me a message and he said, you know, he really enjoyed these videos and he encouraged me to carry on. So he's one of the reasons why I made up this video, and thanks a lot to him for the support. And I am going to try and whack out a few more videos before the season 12 begins, just to maybe help some of you with ideas. And, you know, you might not agree with me and you might set up a bit differently, but at least, you know, this is the starting block. This is just, you know, my opinion on the lists, and you might think, oh yeah, that's a good idea, or no, I do it like this, or like that. So this is just really to just give people some ideas about the options available and the kind of armies and how to use them. So there we go. Thanks for watching and see you again soon.